Mac Power Users episode 516, Looking Toward 2020. Hello and welcome back to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett and I am joined, as always, by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Stephen, you sound different.
Do I sound more professional?
You sound like you have a 12-core voice instead of an 8-core voice.
Yeah, it's an upgrade, you know? It's faster. It's got handles now, which is fun. I'm touching it now.
I like the fact that you're recording your first podcast on the new Mac Pro. It is the Mac Power Users. I like that.
It's the first one. It is. So when we recorded last episode, the delivery date was going to be after the new year, and then it showed up 2 days later. Basically, we ended our recording, and I had an email saying, "Oh, it's going to be there in 48 hours." Like, oh, I'm not sure what happened there, but it shipped from the U.S. It shipped from Texas, and I got it, and it's all set up. And I'll put a picture in the show notes of it set up under my desk, and I have new speakers because I was using the iMac Pro, which has, as you know, actually like kind of fantastic internal built-in speakers.
Yeah.
And the LG 5K internal speakers are not great. So I actually tried a couple of different speakers, and I found some sort of like, they're reference monitors to a degree, but they, I don't know, I've been really happy with them so far. So I just have those now, and they're enormous, and like take up a bunch of desk space, but they sound really good. So it's been a process to get all this going.
I wish I'd known. I actually have a really good set of speakers I could have mailed you because I was able to get rid of them when I got the iMac Pro.
Yeah, these are let me see the box. They're the ProSonos. I'm not actually sure that's how you pronounce that. I'm just gonna lean into it. The Aris E45s or E4.5s. So, anyways, they're bookshelf speaker size, but they're built at least as monitors. So, they're not real bass heavy, and you can actually adjust the EQ on them pretty easily, like with knobs on the back. And
yeah,
I love sound equipment with knobs on the back, so I feel like they called to me.
See, that's one more reason why I'm not a Mac Pro customer. The idea of putting speakers on my desk again after not having them for several years, that is not an appealing idea to me at all.
It's a little bit of a bummer, but I even thought about, like, do I build like a shelf behind the display, like on the wall, and like, do I put them on the shelf? And it's like, okay, before I completely renovate my studio, let's just try them on the desk and see how it goes.
All right. Well, today's the year-end episode. We want to talk about 2019. We want to talk about going forward into 2020. But before we do that, I want to spend a little bit more time on your new hardware because you got it. What was it like? Tell us a little bit about your unboxing experience. And I know as a former genius, you've probably been pulling it apart and putting it back together. Give us the lowdown, man. We're living vicariously through you.
It was great. I mean, the box and everything is like, it's really, I mean, as it should be. It's very nice. Like, the whole unboxing experience is really sweet. There's a bunch of YouTube videos, like, you can go find them. I'll put a couple in the show notes of how that sort of works. But yeah, it is fun. I mean, the first thing I did was, before I even set it up, is I opened it.
Sure.
I took the top of it off and poked around, and it's very beautiful inside. It's all shiny chrome and cool black boards. So all I've really done is I added that Pegasus hard drive enclosure that we spoke about last time, the small one of the two. They have one that's like a big RAID. I didn't go for that. This is just basically like a very expensive piece of metal to mount a couple drives in it. And so I got that installed, and I had it came with an 8 terabyte hard drive, and then I was going to put another drive in the second enclosure. I ended up finding on Amazon, they sell a bunch of them, and I mean, there's like $4 a piece or something. These metal brackets that basically let you mount a 2.5-inch drive in a space designed for a 3.5-inch drive.
Yeah.
So I put one of my SSDs, my old external ones, in there, set up the 8 terabyte Time Machine, a drive for Time Machine, and even under my desk. And I actually listened back to the show because I predicted, oh, that drive will be under the desk, I won't hear it. they shipped this thing with the loudest Toshiba hard drive like known to humankind. It was like, I mean, to the point where I think it actually may be like something may be wrong with it. So I'm actually going to talk to their support and be like, is it normal this drive should be this loud? So it's grinding away. Was grinding away in the Mac Pro, and
the most expensive upgrade in your life, and your computer just got louder.
Yes. So that's not okay in any way. So I ended up opening it up again and putting my other 4 terabyte SSD in, at least until I work out what's going on with this drive, or maybe I can find a quieter one. So right now, like my internal drive and my Time Machine drive have the same capacity, which you really want a larger capacity for Time Machine. But I've got like a 1.8 terabytes free on the internal drive now. So I've got plenty. I got some breathing room until I figure this out. So for now, I've got 2 SSDs mounted in these like El Cheapo brackets, put in the very expensive bracket, all plugged into the Mac Pro.
I feel like you should never again soil your Mac Pro with a spinning drive.
I'm
just thinking that.
I think that may be true. The problem is if you need more than 4 terabytes, you have very limited options when it comes to SSDs. There's a Mac Sales, OWC. They announced I forget what they're calling it, but I'll put it in the show notes. It's this PCI card, and basically you can put in 4 of the little M.2, the tiny little SSDs.
Yeah, like the internal ones they put on the laptops.
Yeah, very similar. Like it looks like a stick of gum.
Yeah.
And they have this where you can put 4. Those M.2 drives, most of them cap out at 2 terabytes right now. And this card, you can put 4 of them on there, and then you can RAID them together. So you could stripe it all and get 8 terabytes, or do RAID 5 or 10 and get 6 terabytes. You can divide up how you want.
Yeah.
But it's like $1,600, which is, I mean, M.2 drives are cheap. This card is expensive, and I like OWC, and so I would like to check this out at some point. But if you need more than a 4 terabyte volume, your options go way down. I think that will get better over time, but for now, it's a little bit tricky.
Maybe time to throw just a little bit of data overboard, or put it on a spinning archive drive that you don't keep attached or something.
Yeah, I need to do something. I mean, the current situation is temporary, but at least the machine is silent again. And I think I sent you a screenshot the other night. I pushed it by exporting a 4K video out of Final Cut, and at the same time rendering the audio of the podcast-a-thon, which is 6 hours of audio.
Yeah.
Rendering it in Forecast, or encoding it, I should say, from M4A to MP3. And Forecast is the tool I use for this, and it's multi-threaded. And it maxed out all 12 cores it was like 10 minutes or something. It took a long time. And the thing was silent. Now, you could feel the air out the back. It was warm, but totally silent. It was very impressive.
That was a beautiful menu bar. I'll just say that.
It was cool. A bunch of all those graphs all full. So,
well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. It sounds like you're already putting it to work, and that's good.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and I look forward to once the dust sort of settles with my setup, being able to go into it over time and adjust things, and the storage will be something I need to keep an eye on. But now I have options internally, which is what I wanted.
Yeah, I saw recently. I spent some time looking at a friend's LG monitor. Mm-hmm. And that's just a deal killer. I like the glass. I like the way the iMac looks.
Yeah, it's weird that it doesn't have the cover glass, but it's fine. My fingers are crossed for Apple to do something here. One thing I did want to talk about, just because I haven't seen it or heard it anywhere else, is that the base GPU on the Mac Pro has 2 HDMI ports out the back, but my display is Thunderbolt. And so like, well, how do you plug it in? Well, it's all of the Apple's video cards are MPX modules, and all that means is that it uses PCI and Thunderbolt to connect to the system. And so my display, my 5K display, is actually plugged into one of the Thunderbolt ports on the back of the Mac Pro on the I/O card. It's actually not plugged into the GPU at all, but because it's an MPX module, it can basically route all of its data over the internal Thunderbolt bus and then out to the display. It's very strange. I've never had a computer like this before. And the higher end MPX modules, which I'll upgrade at some point, they have Thunderbolt on them, but this low end one doesn't. And I got it out of the box and I was like, oh no, like did I miss something that I can't use this display with this computer? And so I plugged it into the Thunderbolt 3 port, and it worked just fine. It's just very strange not to plug it into the graphics card. It's a very unusual setup.
Well, I mean, that's we've all had a lifetime of using graphics cards, and well, the people that have ever worked on the other side of the fence, and you put the graphics card in, you plug into the graphics card. You never plug into the monitor connection on the motherboard because that's the really bad
Right.
graphics. Yeah.
It's very unusual, but it works totally fine. And
Yeah.
it's an oddity of the system.
What's been the most surprising thing for you now you've been working with it for a few days?
I mean, I am a little surprised that under load it is silent. I thought I would hear something. Now, I don't have, it's air quotes around this, just the 12 core. So it's not like the 28. And I don't have a bunch of video cards in it generating heat. But I mean, those renders took a long time, and that workload I would have heard the iMac Pro without a doubt. And
Yeah.
I did not hear the Mac Pro. Now it's under the desk. I mean, I got down next to it on the floor, and that really impressed me. And as someone who records a lot of audio, it's one reason I went with the iMac Pro is because it was quiet. And so it's that's really impressed me. And so far, I've been moving it around, like unplugging and plugging things in. But like once that all settles, it's just going to be nice to know that I've got something here that I can depend on for a long time. It's the beginning of a beautiful, long relationship.
And last question, because you're a human, you're not
I
a
am.
robot. I know that some part of your brain is planning the next upgrade to this Mac Pro.
Sure.
What is it? What's the next thing you're going to do?
Probably the GPU.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because what's in it isn't even as good as what's in the iMac Pro. And I noticed in that Final Cut project, I was doing some stuff in it, and it definitely felt slower in places than the iMac Pro did. And I don't do a lot of video, but when I do it, I want it to go smoothly. And so I think at some point, probably they're actually not for sale yet as of this recording, a few days before Christmas, but maybe sometime in the next few months, if those MPX modules go on sale, we can just buy one. I think I will upgrade to the either the intermediate one that's not for sale yet. There's a graphics card that Apple has announced but isn't listed anywhere, or go up to the Vega, like the next level up, which I think is $2,800. So that's not going to happen tomorrow. But maybe by the time it's available, sometime into 2020, I think that at that point, everything about this system would be faster than what I had.
Well, the one thing I would suggest is just wait 6 months, because I suspect that I think there's more to be told about these graphics cards. Yeah.
I hope that that's true, that Apple really stays on it, but we'll see. And there's also, of course, you can put in like a regular AMD video card, but they all have fans. I don't want that. So I hope that Apple stays on top of it, releasing new components for the system.
Awesome. Well, you have to keep us posted on your ongoing adventures with Mac Pro.
Yeah, I feel like with those guys who have like a hot rod in the garage, right? And they're always like, oh, I got to rebuild the carburetor, like changing the points, or like, whatever it is. I kind of feel like that now, but with a computer. It's the nerdiest version of that possible.
I mean, I would be super tempted to just keep the case open because they're so pretty on the inside.
It won't run. It's got to be shut.
Does it? Yeah.
But man, that if you ever get the chance to like take the top of a Mac Pro off with permission of its owner, definitely do it, because it is a very satisfying, like just the handle and everything. It's all very nicely done.
For the show notes, can you give us a picture of the inside too of yours?
Yeah. I'll do some photos, and I'll put them in the show
notes. Do a photo shoot with your Mac Pro.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, that's awesome. Okay, well, that's not actually why we got on the mic today, though. It's the end of the year. Hard to believe. First of all, that's awesome, right? Got through another year of Mac Power Users. Lots of cool stuff happened this year. We wanted to start the show looking back a little bit at 2019, but the focus of today's show is looking forward to 2020. Things we'd like to see happen. We asked off in the forums and got some great comments from the listeners as well. But let's start with 2019, looking back. For the show, I thought we had a really good year with Mac Power Users.
I do too. I mean, it's hard to believe that I've been on the show for a year now, and and I've got to say, like right off the bat, the Mac Power Users community has been so welcoming to me in every way possible. It's a big deal to join a show like this after it's been running for a long time. I was very nervous about it, and And even though I felt confident that you and I were a good team and that, we could continue to produce the high level of show that MPU has been known for a really long time, I was nervous. And the audience, y'all out there have been so welcoming to me, but in person, if we see each other or in emails or on the forums. And I just want to say thank you just off the bat to those of you who have reached out to me over the last year, because it really means a lot and has put me at ease and has made MPU feel like home. And that's something that means a lot to me.
Yeah, I was just signing Katie's Christmas card last night. I'm like, I miss talking to her every week, but I've been having a really good time with Steven too, so it's all good.
Yeah,
we had 2 live events. We got on because we did live events years ago, but we kind of got off that bandwagon for a little while, and I was really happy to do shows in front of a live audience. That was really fun. I'll tell you, when we did the one in Chicago and my family was there, I actually got nervous because my family was there. Isn't that weird?
I feel the same way. I mean, my wife Mary was at WWDC and she came to the Live Connected, and I've done a lot of live shows at this point, and I was nervous. I was like, not nervous in the sense that like it's just very different when your family's there, and like Mary, like your family, like, they don't listen to your shows on a regular basis, and like it's like you're gonna see me in an element and through a light you don't normally see me. And for me, at least, I don't know how you feel about this, but like I play an exaggerated version of myself on stage, right? Especially at WWDC. Like the Connected show is very hectic and goofy, and that is a push for me, and it's something that I find exhausting. Like I'm glad we don't do a lot of those back to back, and like to be seen in that environment by your significant other is it's a very weird thing, and so I totally empathize with that feeling.
Yeah, I in terms of just the on-stage persona, I am just who I am. After 500 shows, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But but it was just weird. But that was really great. We hit show 500 this year, which, who would have thought? And a real highlight for Mac Power Users this year was after 10 years of production, Apple was listening. They invited us to WWDC to attend the keynote. We got to interview the product manager for that fancy Mac Pro under Steven's desk. And it really just felt great getting some acknowledgement from Apple after having, I feel like, done a lot for the community over these years. And I don't know, it felt really good to me this year.
Totally. And I hope, we don't know what the future holds. We're hopeful that we can continue to do that sort of thing. But even if we can't, I think the nod from Apple to podcasting in general is a positive thing. And, podcasts are a really unique thing to our community, and so many people are invested in them, right? Like, I mean, it's our jobs to produce them now. And yeah, it was really special. And it did feel really good to sort of get the tap on the shoulders, like, getting called up to the major leagues, even if it's not ongoing. So that was really, really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. How about Apple? How do you think Apple did this year?
I think Apple had a pretty good 2019, honestly. I think if you look at it from the power user perspective, on the hardware and the software front, I think they did a pretty good job. I'll let you talk about iPad OS because that's more your jam than mine. But the Mac hardware teams were like on fire. They released a bunch of stuff. They didn't quite get the keyboard fixed on all the models, but I expect that will happen early next year. We didn't get new iPad hardware, but we didn't get new iPad Pro hardware, I should say. But what we had in 2018 is still really awesome. And the iPad Mini, and the iPad Air all got really nice updates this year. And of course, the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro are spectacular as well. So I feel like hardware, I would give them an A if they got the keyboard replaced on everything, but I'll give them a B+. I got to knock them a little bit for the MacBook Air and the 13-inch, still having the bad keyboard. And the hardware was really good.
I feel like the Mac hardware in particular, they kind of fell asleep a few years ago.
Definitely.
And they woke up, but you wake up, you still got to get out of bed, get showered, and all that. And
yeah.
I think it took them a couple years to kind of bring to fruition what started once they realized, oh, wait a second, we're not doing the Mac justice. And this year we saw a lot of those, those bets paid off with the Mac Pro, with the improved MacBook Pro with the better keyboard, which seems to be universally adored by people that, like the MacBook Pro. The MacBook Air, am I wrong? Is it this year that it came out, or was it 2018, or was it late 20?
It was late 2018.
Yeah, well, either way, the MacBook Air is back in a good design, except for that keyboard, which we both hope will get fixed. It just seems like they kind of got their act together on the MacBook and the Mac in general. I'm with you. The iPad Pro didn't need an update this year, and honestly, if they come out with a new one next year, I shouldn't say this on this show, but
Put it on the record, David. Put it on the record.
they'd have to really sell me because I use mine every day. I love it, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I need. Why would I need a better one?
I kind of feel the same way about the iPad. Like, it is really good, and I love the design language. I hope that design comes to the iPhone, like the flat edges and everything. But
Oh yeah,
even with iPad OS, like, it feels plenty powerful. Like, I never feel like I'm waiting for my iPad to do something.
you're never peaking all 12 cores.
No fan noise either. Totally silent, just like my computer.
Same thing. iPhone hardware, solid year.
Yeah.
That the new camera I thought was a gimmick when I heard about it, and now I love it. And
I love
use
the
it
wide
all
angle.
the time. Yeah,
Me too.
or even more than as much as I like the wide angle. What I like even more is the ability to take portrait shots at 1x.
Yeah.
I wish that could be the default because every time I go to portrait mode, I got to switch that. But
I had some complaints about the iPhone, the XS camera. I thought, especially in the HDR mode, it looked a little like too contrasty. Like, but they also got rid of a bunch of noise and smoothed it all too much. But yeah, the 11 Pro is like, it's my favorite iPhone in a long time. I really love it, and the camera is incredible. And it's such a good example of Apple's like hardware and software playing hand in hand. Where like it does some wild stuff. Like, cameras are as much software as they are hardware now, and Apple has just killed it this year in that regard.
yeah, now software is a more interesting question in terms of grading Apple for 2019. The narrative clearly is that they blew it because we're getting so many software updates and bug fixes since September. I think it's more complicated than that, honestly. If you go, wind back to WWDC, we were all just ecstatic about all of the features they announced. I felt like for several years Apple was not pushing hard enough on all the platforms in terms of software. There was a lot of features that I wanted that weren't there, and it was like this was the year they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do that, and we're going to do that too." And it just felt it was so awesome seeing them announce all this stuff. And I guess it turns out they bit off more than they could chew, and there's a lot of commentary on that, and I don't really want to get into all of it. But they shipped a lot of the features, but not all of them, and the beta period was way buggier than usual, and we've had all these software updates, which I think are generally a bad thing because there are people that don't listen to Mac Power users that just own an iPhone, and when they have to do software updates every week, they start to lose faith in the platform. So I understand why that's all bad. I wrote a post on MacSparky before kind of everything hit the fan, just saying, look, I think they need to keep pushing, even if it means that everything is not perfect on day one, they need to keep pushing. And I really don't want to go back to these days where we have these lackluster WWDCs where they say, hey, we made this cool emoji and that's the new feature this year. I really want them to keep pushing like this. Maybe they bit off too much this year, but I hope that we don't get back into this pendulum swing where we have 1 year where they say they're going to do a bunch of things and then the next year they're not going to do anything. So I guess this story really needs to be told in 2020. But I don't want to be super critical about them being aggressive and trying to do a lot. I guess my complaint would be towards management more than the line programmers, just saying, look, hey, you guys got to be better about figuring out which one of these make the cut and not. But I'm not really sure I'm verbalizing what I feel about this, but I don't want to be so critical that, if I was at Apple, I'd say, well, then we just won't give them anything next year. You know what I mean?
It's really complicated, right? And
yeah,
I'm not a developer, but I can't imagine the complexity of pulling together a project as big as macOS or iOS. All the apps, all the subsystems, and it be usable at the end of that development cycle. Like it seems like a miracle to me, honestly. How is it possible? But I think you're right, and I agree with you that I tend to look towards their management, this being a management issue, because I've never met anyone who works for Apple who isn't incredibly enthusiastic about the work that they do. And I think the direction change that you talked about of, hey, iOS 12 is going to be slow. We're going to pull off the gas and focus on stability. And then 13 is like a train wreck, and they have to put a bunch of updates out. And like, there's got to be middle ground between the two of those. And I agree with you. I hope they don't go into this like sort of back and forth type year where we're having this conversation every other year. I do think, though, that at this point, at the end of the year, iOS 13 and iPadOS, even Catalina, are in pretty good shape. Like, I feel like I have not run into really any issues in quite a while on my phone, iPad, or Mac that you can blame on the operating system. And so I feel like they've gotten the ship righted, and now I'm just hopeful that they learned some lessons that they can apply moving forward.
I mean, one simplistic answer that comes to my mind is just at WWDC say, these are the features we're going to get out in the next year, not these are the features we're going to get out in September. And in a lot of cases over the last several years, that's been what's happened anyway. Like this year, they announced all these kind of Dropbox-like features where we'd be able to share files and stuff from iCloud Drive, which just aren't there yet. And I expect we'll probably get them sometime next year. We'll talk about that later in the show. But, why give yourself this September deadline for all of that work? And, but, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. I'm sure there's a lot of people smarter than me that have thought about that and found a reason not to say that. But I do think that they could have certainly done better this year. I wish that the final release had been more stable because, like I said, I think about people like my wife who say, "Oh, another update. What is this?" And
yeah,
they don't understand what's going on and how hard they're working at adding so much to the operating system to satisfy people like us MPU listeners. They're trying to walk that balance, but they need to work on that more.
I think that's exactly right.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by our friends over at 1Password. Go to 1password.com/MPU in all caps. The all caps part is important to get 20% off. And right now, as we hit the end of the year, I think this is a great time to sign yourself up for a family plan. I did this once in a fit of New Year enthusiasm 3 or 4 years ago. And my kids were in high school at the time, starting to get access to a lot of passwords for the stuff they were doing in their lives, and I knew they had really lousy password habits. So that's what inspired me to go sign up. I've been a paying customer myself now for several years with the family plan, and I really think it's a great way to go for setting up password and actually training your kids to have good password habits. With a 1Password for Family account, you can get up to 5 people on the account, and it does 3 things. It shares, it protects, and it lets you relax as the person in charge. So by sharing with the 1Password family account, you can share the Netflix password with your kids without sharing your banking password. It's a system that's compartmentalized and easy enough to use that everybody can get into it. But like I said, you don't have to put all the passwords in one bank where everybody can see it. Like my kids have a bunch of passwords for the stuff they do with their school. I don't see those, but the stuff that we have that's related to the family, we all get that. You have the ability to set permissions so you can decide who to share your information with and what they can do with it. Where the stuff doesn't need to get shared, you can keep it personal. So you've still got that same benefit. But you get the protection for the whole family. You can sign in to your account from a web browser. You always get the most up-to-date versions of the software. And the 1Password apps are award-winning. They're just great apps. Just the other day, I was using 1Password. One of the things I've done with it now is, when you get these 2-factor authentication things, there are applications out there that you can buy that will give you the 2-factor authentication code. Some people don't realize 1Password can do that too. So I've got all that built right into 1Password. I just added my PayPal 2-factor authentication the other day, and I opened up 1Password. I shot a picture of the QR code on the screen, and now all my authentication takes place right there in 1Password. But with the family account, you get 24/7 support. You have an item history backup. They've got the Watchtower service, which it keeps track of the websites that you have passwords for. And if they have a major breach, the app's going to tell you, hey, you know what? You should change your password at this site. They've had problems. And it just takes care of this stuff for you. And like I said, the best part of it was sitting down with my kids, not being a jerk about it, but saying, hey, guys, I want you to protect your privacy going forward. Why don't you try this app out? And they totally bought onto it. And they're using 1Password. And as they grow up in their lives, hopefully they'll have safe and secure passwords going forward. So once again, head over to 1password.com/MPU in all caps. Set your family up for success on the internet with a 1Password for Family account. Thank you, 1Password, for all of your support of the Mac Power users.
So let's talk a little bit about what we'd like to see from Apple in 2020. And I think the bouncing back and forth between hardware and software makes sense. Do you want to get us started?
Okay. My first wish for 2020 is that we kill all the butterflies. Kill them all.
You mean the keyboards, not the lovely little... okay.
Butterflies in general, I'm a fan of butterflies. I don't like them in my keyboards.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so great. I mean, I've been using this new one and typing on it, and it feels just like typing at my iMac, the exact same keyboard in essence. And the space bar still works. Everything's good. I mean, I just don't buy the narrative like, well, we got to give this a year to see if it's going to be good. It's going to be fine. I mean, it's just like the keyboard they've been shipping with iMacs for years. But just, do whatever you have to do to fix that problem now. I don't want to get to the end of 2020 and still see people paying thousands of dollars for keyboards that are going to, very possibly fail.
Mm-hmm. They got to do it. They've just got to do it.
The sooner the better. I mean, it's already a problem because there's somebody listening to this show, just as this show publishes, somebody in the world is buying a Mac with a butterfly keyboard in it. And 2, 3, 4 years from now, that's going to be a problem. I mean, we're going to be hearing about this forever.
Mm-hmm.
Or it feels like forever. So just like we got to stop, and I'm really going to try this year. I know some of the listeners say, Dave, stop whining about the keyboard, but I'm really going to try in 2020 to turn the page on this, but I'm still going to talk about it a little bit until Apple fixes it across the board.
As far as laptops go, I would like to see that 13-inch MacBook Pro get the treatment the 16-inch got. So maybe it gets a little bit bigger. Maybe it gains a 14-inch display. Of course, the new keyboard, but also the better cooling. The 13-inch MacBook Pro is a really weird machine because it has the Intel integrated graphics. It doesn't have like the sort of fancy pants, big graphics the 16-inch has. And I don't know if they could accommodate that even in the 14-inch. But I know in my experience with the 13-inch Touch Bar machines over the years, the battery life isn't spectacular, so they could address that. They do run hot. So I would like to see that machine grow up a little bit. Plus, I think 14 inches is just a really nice size. Apple used to sell PowerBooks back in the day at 14 inches. They had the iBook as well. And it's a great Goldilocks size where it's not a tiny little 13-inch, but it's not so big you can't use it, a bunch of different places. And so I'm really hopeful that 13-inch MacBook Pro sort of graduates into this new design language.
I feel like the 13/14-inch footprint must be way more popular than the bigger one.
Oh yeah, it's got to be.
So yeah, I feel like that. I mean, I would be shocked if we don't get a new update to that with the new keyboard. The one I'm worried about is the MacBook Air because it's a relatively new computer, and it's probably got started before they decided to fix the keyboard or change the keyboard. And my guess is there's some work that has to go into that. But man, the sooner the better.
Especially, I mean, the MacBook Air's got to be the most popular notebook, which makes it the most popular Mac. And people in our world, right, listeners of this show, people who are hanging out in the forums, like we get it. Like we're not happy with the keyboard, but we understand what to do if it goes wrong. But if you send your kid to college with a MacBook Air and the E key stops, like that's a thing they got to deal with. And they just, I know we keep harping on it, but like, honestly, if this is all Apple did hardware wise in like the first half of 2020, I'd be totally fine with it. Just fix it.
I've got some wishes and desires for iOS hardware in 2020, but I know you've got some more on the Mac. Why don't you share some of those?
Yeah, just a handful of things. So the iMac and the iMac Pro, like that design comes from 2012. I think there's room to improve that design, to bring the bezels down a bit in size, to maybe they can apply the cooling from the iMac Pro into the regular iMac so it's not as noisy. And I think hand in hand with that is finally moving past spinning hard drives. This came up on the forums earlier this week. Someone was looking to buy an entry level iMac, and a bunch of us like, don't do it. Like, you've got to upgrade to an SSD because the spinning hard drive is just so slow. And the Fusion drives, they've made the SSD section of the Fusion drive smaller and smaller over the years. And so you're running on that spinning drive a lot more than maybe you think you will be. And that's just a little embarrassing that their entry level iMacs are pretty unusable for a lot of people. And there are a bunch of these running around Memphis that I've opened and put SSDs in for people, just like I did at MacStock, because they're just so slow. So with an iMac design update, I would hope that Apple could finally get the system to all solid state storage and finally leave spinning drives in the past.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a given at all that we'll get a design update to the iMac. I
don't think it is either.
If they were going to do that, we would have got it with the iMac Pro a few years ago. Well, I'm sure we'll get up. It seems like Apple's been getting much better about updating the internal hardware, like, the latest Intel chips, or maybe even, will this be the year that we see something other than Intel go on a Mac?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've been burned by guessing the year of the ARM Mac transition before, so I think the stars are aligning, whether it's this year or 2021. I don't know, but when that happens, that could really open the door for some really interesting things, especially in the notebook space. So whenever the ARM transition happens, I'm excited to see what that brings, but I don't know if it'll be this year or not. If I had to bet money on it, I would say that it will not be 2020, but that may just be me like not wanting to get burned again by a bad prediction, but I hope it's coming.
I feel like the fact that one of my best friends just spent a ton of money on a Mac Pro that's Intel based actually adds to the possibility that we'll get our Mac.
You're probably not wrong about that. So again, like the title last week, taking one for the team. But I expect that when the ARM transition will start in the notebook line, and I expect that it would be much slower than the Intel transition. They moved everything to Intel in like 9 months. I don't think that's going to happen with ARM, but who knows? But I think until then, if Apple can continue to improve their Intel based Macs and just keep moving forward with them and making improvements like they have the last couple of years, then everyone will be happy.
I'll tell you one thing. Even if they don't redesign the iMac, there's a bunch, the iMac Pro and the iMac are very different computers on the inside.
Yeah.
And I know that you can't bring it all down because the iMac Pro is much more expensive and got better chips in it and like that. But I do feel like the T2 and some of the technology that's in the iMac Pro should be able to find its way down to the iMac. And you referenced earlier that wouldn't it be great if that new thermal system they have in the iMac Pro gets to the iMac? And if they remove the spinning drive, I think that's a total possibility. So fingers crossed.
It's also the only Mac without a T2 security chip in it. And it's like, that is as far as desktops go, it's a very popular model. And I think Apple wants to get that security to everybody. So I think there's room for, I think it's just a matter of if how high of a priority is it. I would assume the notebooks are a higher priority for them, but I think they'll make it around to the iMac. I'm hopeful that they do, because even though they don't sell as many of them as notebooks, I kind of view the iMac still as the sort of the flagship line. Like sort of this is like what I think of as a Mac. And maybe that's just my perception as a desktop user, but things getting a little long in the tooth is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. And something that occurred to me just as we were talking that I'm not going to hold my breath for, but wouldn't it be nice if we had some kind of Touch ID, Face ID, something into the desktop computers? Because having used a laptop again now after a while, boy, it sure is nice being able just to put my fingerprint on the upper right corner of that computer and have it authenticate one password, and all the stuff that I do that needs a password is just solved with that in the laptop. It'd be really nice to see them do that. And I always thought, well, they don't want to do it wirelessly, but you made a really good point, I think, on the show recently. It's like, well, they do it with the watch. Why can't they do it on a keyboard?
Yeah, I'd love it. I mean, same thing for me. I use my notebook for a little while, then back to a desktop. It's like, I just want it. Like, just put it somewhere, I sort of had this vision once of, I would imagine if they do it, they'll integrate it into a keyboard. You have to buy a new keyboard. But like, what if they just made the world's like tiniest USB-C dongle It was like just the size of like your pad on your finger. So like just the Touch ID sensor with a USB-C port off the end of it. Like you plug it into the back of your iMac and then you like
You just reach around.
yeah, touch this little like nubbin stick. I don't think that's how they're going to do it, but it sort of made me laugh to think about that. Like, what if I put it on a really long USB-C extension cable and like had it under my desk, like some sort of like secret button, to like, I don't know, like lock all the doors. I don't know, something funny, but it would be sweet to have that because the software's there, right? They have it on all their notebooks.
Yeah, no, I it's like there's got to be discussions about that going on internally at Apple. Yeah.
What about software? Do you have anything that's sort of towards the top of your list for 2020?
Well, actually, before we talk about software, I do have a few iOS things I want to talk about.
Okay.
We've had this new iPhone design. I think has been good. I want a new one this year. I want the iPad Pro design translated to an iPhone.
Yes.
This is not really like a prediction show much as a desire show, I guess. But man, wouldn't it be nice if we had? Because every time I pick up this iPad Pro, I just love it. I have to admit, even though everybody, I guess, hated the antenna, I thought the iPhone 4 was some of the peak iPhone design. I just loved that look of that metal band around the two pieces of glass. And I'd like to see something kind of, reminiscent of that using this new design they have on the iPad Pro. I'd love to see that make its way to the iPhone this year.
Me too. Those flat sides are awesome. I think it'd feel really premium. And really, the iPhone 11 Pro, you could draw a pretty clear line from like the iPhone 6 to the current design. They've improved it vastly, but it's step back, sort of look at it with one eye closed. It's basically the same design. So I think this is something that is definitely gonna happen, and I think it would be a good way to keep people excited about the phones.
What about the USB-C?
I would love it on the phone. It would be great. Everything else in my life uses USB-C now, except the iPhone. Now, and look, it's anytime you change the port on the iPhone, it's a giant pain, right? But this time around, I think there's some things going for it. One, USB-C is already in a lot of other products. So with Lightning, they moved to something that didn't exist anywhere else. But with USB-C, it's already out in the world. There's a world of USB-C things out there. But secondly, we have wireless charging now. And a lot of people, I think, use wireless charging, on their nightstand or maybe at their desk. I do both. A lot of new cars come with wireless charging pads. Like you put your phone like in the console somewhere and it wirelessly charges. So that is, like for me, honestly, the only time I plug in my phone is to fast charge it. Like if I'm traveling and I've got 30 minutes in the hotel before I go out for another 6 hours, I can put it on that big charger and it charges really quickly. But other than that, like I don't ever plug things in. And when I do, it'd be nice for it to be the same everywhere else. I have no idea if they'll do this, but I know that it would make my life a lot easier in some ways, especially when traveling.
I think this is another one where the nerds would celebrate it, and the vast majority of users would hate it because you're going to make them get different cables or change something.
I mean, every person in my family would blame me, but
yeah,
I can't help it.
Yeah. Well, either way, I don't know. I hope that we get some great hardware in 2020.
Yeah, man. They've been firing on all cylinders. I think they'll keep doing it.
Yeah, I think the improvements to the Mac aren't done yet. I do think that we're going to have more to talk about next year.
Me too. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by FreshBooks. If you're a freelancer, if you're working for yourself, you're doing your own invoicing, you know how time consuming it can be. And then if you add things like tracking expenses or you got to have like a payment processor online, you can spend a bunch of time doing overhead and not actually doing the work that you set out to do when you became a freelancer or went out on your own. And so that's why FreshBooks is so exciting, because you can get 192 hours back by simplifying this stuff, because they've drastically reduced the time it takes to deal with this paperwork. Over 10 million people have used FreshBooks to save this time, including me. I use it at work every day. FreshBooks can automate things like late payment email reminders, so you can spend less time chasing down people to pay you and more time doing the work, more time solving problems for other people. When you email a client an invoice, you can log into FreshBooks and you can see the status of it. So you can see if they've opened it, if they've looked at it, you can see when they looked at it. It gives you information when you go to talk to them if you have questions or they have questions. You make sure everyone's on the same page, and that's really important when you're trying to collect an invoice and keep the lights on. If you're listening to this and you're not using FreshBooks yet, now's the time to try it. We're at the beginning of a new year. It's a great time to reconsider how you're doing this sort of stuff in your business. FreshBooks is offering an unrestricted 30-day free trial for listeners of the show. There's no credit card required. All you have to do is go to freshbooks.com/MPU and enter the code MacPowerUsers in the How Did You Hear About Us section. That's freshbooks.com/MPU. Our thanks to FreshBooks for the support of the show.
So, Stephen, where do you want to see Apple go with software next year? Why don't we start with the Mac this time?
Okay. This, in a way, is a harder question. Like, I thought a lot about this, and I sort of bring it down into a couple of categories. One, I think that it's high time that we see some more of the good parts of iOS come to the Mac. And I know that's like a risky thing to say because in the past that's ended up with weird things. But the prime example for me is something like Messages, where on the Mac it has apps and stickers, like all this stuff, or on iOS, excuse me. But on the Mac, it's basically just the old iChat app, just with like AIM ripped out and iMessage plugged in. Like it hasn't changed much. And I think Messages is like low key one of Apple's most important products because it keeps people in their ecosystem. And the Mac should have like a first rate, like at a seat at the big kids table version of the Messages client. And I would love to see that. It would be great for it to be Catalyst because I think Apple and Catalyst was done mostly in secret. So there was no like headlining app from Apple that used Catalyst, just a bunch of like kind of crummy ones. And
yeah,
I think it would be great for Apple to come on stage in the summer and say, look, let us show you the new Messages app. It has all this stuff. Oh, by the way, we built it with Catalyst, proving that you can do it too. And that would be a huge win for everybody.
Agreed. I'd like to see, I mean, people say, well, the Mac is good. I mean, they've been making it all these years. The operating system's stable. There's nothing to change. I have a bunch of complaints. And one of the ones that I would like to see get better is just the general window management, the spaces, the existing system on the Mac to put two apps on the screen at once. I mean, I do it with Keyboard Maestro and it's fine, but if you use Apple's system with it, it's really kind of bananas. You got to drag and drop. And then once you have something there, if you want to remove an app from that double pane view, you have to hit the little, traffic light, and then it breaks it and turns the other one into a full screen app. I mean, it's just not user friendly. And I don't know anybody that really uses it effectively. And I think they need to take a look at some of that stuff because that's something that they've managed to more or less sort out on the iPad, where you've got a wide screen. But the Mac hasn't really got much love in that department. I felt like Stacks was a good start. Like Stacks is a great feature for a lot of people who, don't want to like try and figure all this stuff out. I think they need to take that sentiment and stretch it into spaces and just general file and window management. That's something I feel like that is low-hanging fruit that they could easily solve if they put some resources into it. And I'd love to see that happen this year.
I mean, every couple of years, I feel like they go into mission control and like change something, but I'm never sure if it's actually for the better. And I think a bunch of people just ignore all that stuff because it's super confusing.
They just need to kind of start over with it and just make it something very much more accessible. And I don't know, that's something I'd like to see improve.
Me too. I mean, there's this whole world of third-party apps that do it well. Honestly, Windows does it pretty well. It's like it's frustrating that the Mac is sort of behind in this area. And yeah, I think I think most people don't know about any of that stuff, right? Like, and they accidentally hit the green stoplight and it goes full screen. They don't know how to get it back. Like, all that can be better.
The other thing I'd like to see with Mac software, and this is kind of part and parcel of iCloud, really, but if iCloud can get the Dropbox-like features that we've been hearing about, I'd like to see them integrate that better into the Finder for normal users. The ability to share a file, and like, what if you right-clicked on a file and there was a share via iCloud? And I mean, just make it much easier for users to get into. And I feel like the underlying mechanics aren't quite there yet, and maybe this is already on the whiteboard. But I'd like to see, if you're going to get Dropbox like features, I'd like it to be easier than Dropbox. And since it's one company doing the whole enchilada, I would hope that they can do that.
Yeah. The iCloud file sharing thing really is frustrating, because I think even what they showed they were going to do this year, which at this recording hasn't actually shipped yet, even that wasn't enough. It's like you're getting there, but I mean, look, I would love to experiment with iCloud Drive more, but all I do with Dropbox is share stuff, so it's not really an option. But I think people want the option. I think Apple should be competitive in it.
Well, even with my laptop, I'm a laptop owner now. I have not installed Dropbox because I just don't like it seems like it's very invasive when you install the Dropbox into the system, and it does a lot of root level stuff in order to put all those icons in the Finder, and I just and I've been getting by fine without it, but it's not my main computer. If it was my main computer, I'd have to install it, but I just don't want to do that. And it'd be nice if Apple solved this problem for me. And I totally get this is really hard, and they need to get the underlying feature before they can make it pretty in the user interface. But that I feel like this is a good year to get that rolling.
Sounds great to me. Sign me up for that feature.
You got any other Mac software stuff you want to see this year?
I mean, I think it's a lot of the first-party apps, mainly Mail comes to mind. It's like there's so much good stuff going on in Mail clients elsewhere. We talked about this from the iOS perspective, but Mac Mail has been unchanged for a really long time, and it's kind of being outshone by a lot of pretty decent third-party clients, or even like what Gmail does on the web. And I would like to see a more modern take on email in the built-in client.
I was reading an article where they put like a shark in a pen with like another fish that the sharks like to eat, right? And they put a glass pane between them, and the shark kept banging into the glass, going for the fish, right? And then after like doing this for X number of days or months, they pulled the glass out, and the shark didn't even try to eat the fish anymore. That's me in Apple Mail.
Wow.
I don't, maybe they'll improve it. I'm not going to put that on any lists again. I've been there. I banged my nose into that glass a lot. I'm still using it, and, I found my kind of happy place with it, but because underlying it all is Apple Mail is very stable.
Sure.
And a lot of these third-party apps aren't. So maybe that's why they're not adding features to it. They can't do that without having to break stability. And we, primarily in an email client, we need stability. But yeah, I'm not gonna think about Apple Mail until it actually happens. The one thing I would like, I wrote down on the list here, and this is wish casting, but shortcuts for Mac. I just had an extended email conversation with a listener who was trying to put together some automation on her Mac, and she was trying to make it work in Automator. And the problem is Automator, Sal kind of got cut off at the knees. They never gave Automator the depth of support that they've given shortcuts. So like we couldn't pass a variable to her Automator script. I mean, and I know you can use AppleScript, but this was a not super power user I was trying to help out. And, so anyway, it's just a lot of the stuff we take for granted in shortcuts is not in Automator. So it would be nice if we could get that across, all Apple platforms.
Yeah. And shortcuts is way more user friendly. And we have some desires for shortcut, which we're going to talk about. But you go into Automator and it's confusing what to do, because like the first panel is like, do you want a workflow or an application, or like I don't know, like I just want to do stuff. And I feel like so much of the path within Automator is just really confusing to new users.
Yeah, well, it's limited. There's just a lot that you can't do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And if Sal's listening, he's right now banging his dashboard saying, but you have AppleScript integration and you have scripting, and he's right. And you have Apple. And there's, in a lot of ways, it's way more powerful. But for typical users, or even, I would say power users, a lot of us, it's a bridge too far.
Yeah, that stuff is even harder to get on board with at first. So
and why not put shortcuts for Mac and still include AppleScript support and scripting support? So anyway, I'd like to see that. I don't know if this is the year, but I would like to hope that at some point Apple wants to get that automation story on all of their hardware.
What about iOS?
This year I am not feeling the pain nearly as much as I was last year. So, looking forward, last year I was anxious because I really wanted to use the iPad more, and there was a whole bunch of limitations I was hitting where it just wasn't working, and most of those got fixed this year. And of course it could all be better, but it is reached a minimum level of viability in terms of just the work I do. So that's great. That being said, I am a fan of tags, and I'd like to see better tag support. I'd like to see even more file support. If Apple can get this, Dropbox-like feature, I would like to see that be just as user-friendly on iOS as I'd like it to be on the Mac. And I have many shortcuts requests, but I don't know if you guys want to hear all that stuff right now.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I looked through your shortcut list, and I actually agree with, I think, all of them. So there's some organizational stuff, like there's no folder support in shortcuts.
I want folders, please, folders,
or even basic sorting. Like it's just they're just in there, and you can rearrange them how you want. But it falls down really quickly if you have more than about a dozen shortcuts, I think.
Yeah, and this year they gave us a bunch of triggers. I want more. Rosa and I have been covering iBeacons on automators lately. They're awesome. You should be checking them out. Listen to those shows if you haven't. But I want iBeacons as triggers and shortcuts. I want the whole system to be even more user-friendly. Since I did that shortcuts field guide, I've heard from so many people that have never tried automation and now are using it on a daily basis. I want them to go even further with that. I mean, this is the dream that we wanted with Automator when it first came out, but I think Apple has put together something with shortcuts that a lot of people are trying. More integrations, of course, and then suggested in the forums. I can't believe I didn't put this on the list. Copy and paste blocks. I mean, it's so obvious. I do it in Keyboard Maestro all the time, if not every day, and it drives me batty in shortcuts that once I put together, 6 blocks of automation, that I can't copy and paste them into a different, shortcut.
Yeah, you're just like, I've done this before where I'm building like similar shortcuts, and I'll have like a reference shortcut open on my phone while I'm creating the new one on the iPad even. It's like, there's got to be a better way to share stuff that I've already done.
Well, one way you can do it that is a little meta, but you can make them like subroutines. So if there's like a block of 6 that you want to use in 3 different shortcuts, you just save that shortcut, and then you can run that shortcut from within the other shortcut.
Right.
Because that's one of the actions. But it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes they're just a little different, Mm-hmm. I mean, you use them as a starting point, and then in that case, it doesn't really work. But yeah, there's a lot you could do with shortcuts. Any, stability. I mean, there are a bunch of stability problems still with shortcuts.
Yes.
But that, I feel like because that's at the sharp end of the stick, it's going to have problems like that. But yeah, the folder thing, I mean, it is just turning into madness right now for me.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think my feeling is going into 2020 is they don't have as big of a task this year, and maybe this is the year that they do really dial in and tighten down some of these things.
As far as iCloud, I've got a couple again that we share these. More generous free storage. The 5 gigabytes is just spiteful.
Every year, that's. I'm still banging my nose against that glass. I mean, it just please.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many tech things that I saw by just telling somebody like just pay the 99 cents a month for the next level up. So that would be awesome. I think just continual improvement of things like syncing and the speed of syncing. Like I still have issues in Catalina iOS 13 sometimes where like a note just won't sync until I, force refresh it or force quit the app. It's like, come on, like this should be running more smoothly. And of course we talked about like just do what Dropbox does. Like go through their feature list, build all of them in the Apple, secure private way. And I think a lot more people would be willing to pay more to do that. Or people like me, I forget if you're in the situation or not. I think you are. I pay for a really big iCloud plan for like shared iCloud family sharing, my wife's photo library, my photo library. A, like I want to share photo libraries, but B, I have a bunch of iCloud space I pay for that I don't use. It'd be great to move stuff into there, but I need Dropbox's features. So I think it's got to grow up.
Yeah, my problem is with two kids that also have iPhones. The space isn't as big as you'd think it is. But the
you could use more.
Yeah, but I agree. I mean, I just think keep the ball moving. One of the problems with iCloud is that it means so many different things. Like, for example, when iOS 13 released, one of the big features was we're gonna synchronize colored flags between iOS and Mac. And one of the things I've come to realize with Mail is, rather than try to solve all my Mail problems on an iPhone or iPad, quite often I'll just go through and triage it. And I've got a whole system for, a red flag means one thing, an orange flag means another thing. So I've got different colored flags I apply. And then, so I'll triage on the mobile device, but then when I get to the Mac, I clear them out. But for the first month or so of these new operating systems, the sync status of those flags was just a complete mess. I mean, it's like my Mac would have 32 emails flagged, my iOS device would have 17, my iPhone would have 17 and my iPad would have 42. And I'd be like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, are they all saying, like, if I take care of something, am I going to miss one? And I actually found a couple I missed. I just did. If you got an email from me over the weekend for a MacSparky support question, it's because of this syncing problem. I found a couple that fell through the cracks. But the either way, but now it's started working again. So, but iCloud is like that. There's all these elements to it, and just don't feel like you've got this figured out, Apple. Please keep working on this really hard, because it still needs work. Apple in general, what do you think? What do we need from them next year?
I feel like the path that they're on is a good one. Again, if they can solve the software, whatever happened to iOS 13, if they can solve that. But what I really hope we see is a clearer definition of where they think their platforms are going to go in terms of development. So we spoke about this with John Voorhees on a couple of weeks ago about Mac Catalyst and iOS apps running on the Mac. But is that something developers should do in light of Swift UI? Like, I just don't know if anyone knows the answer to that. I'm not sure if Apple knows the answer to that yet. But I think Apple sort of, leading by example, and good applications written with their own technology, but just telling developers and telling users, this is kind of where we see this going. And it may change some, but this is our broad strokes of what we want to do. And I think in the absence of that, we've had all this fear of, is the Mac just going to become a big iPad? Are they going to continue to simplify it in ways we don't like? What is the iPad going to do? Like, so much of that hand-wringing could just be solved by Apple just saying what's on their mind about this stuff. And I hope that we get a glimpse into that at WWDC this year, like really understanding where they want to go with their platforms and moving them closer together.
I think if we had Apple sitting here today, they'd say, be very clear, the future is Swift UI. But what they haven't been clear about is, when do they anticipate that future really sinking in? At what point is Swift UI going to be in shape for normal developers to be able to use it in their everyday practice? I mean, it's clearly not now. I've talked to developer friends who were only able to use Swift UI because they knew so many inner workings of Swift to begin with that they were able to. It's like it's clearly not in shape now for people to make a lot of apps with it. But, it's like, what is the timeline? Is this something that you anticipate in 3 years or 2 years? I mean, I think that really could help people out. But,
me too.
But overall, I think that Apple has kind of returned a lot of focus to the Mac and to their hardware and to the iOS stuff. I feel like that we had a phase where, you heard about this Apple Car so much and the campus, the new campus they built, that I feel like they got their eye off the ball a little bit. And while I'm happy to see that they're doing music concerts and TV channels and all that stuff, my advice to them is, just remember what got you there. Don't forget this Mac and, iPhone and the software stuff, because I think that's really what's going to pay the bills at the end of the day.
Yep.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Direct Mail. Go to directmailmac.com/MPU to create and send great-looking email newsletters with Direct Mail, an easy-to-use email marketing app designed exclusively for the Mac. Now, if you're looking to grow your customer base or connect with fans or build a following this year, a super cost-effective way to reach people is still email. Over 15 years now, direct mail for the Mac has been the go-to email marketing application for businesses, nonprofits, and schools, and other organizations who want to expand their reach and connect with customers. It's designed just for the Mac, so you get all those good Mac feels when you use the application. You can get your work done in half the time using all the Mac technologies you've grown to love, like drag and drop, keyboard shortcuts, integration with other apps. None of this web nonsense. And direct mail has eye-catching templates that are infinitely customizable and look great on all devices. Direct mail has a helpful customer service staffed by actual humans. There's no chatbots, no AI. I love that. And they're just friendly folks ready to help you at no extra charge. So send your first email campaign today with a free download of direct mail. Listeners of this podcast will also save 10% off the full-featured pricing plans. In order to do that, head over to directmailmac.com/MPU to experience the top-rated email marketing app for Mac. We're heading into a new year. It's a great time to get started with the direct mail marketing, and Direct Mail Mac is the way to go. You can see how they can help your business grow. Our thanks to Direct Mail for their support of the Mac Power users and all of Relay FM.
So let's talk a little bit about the ecosystem at large, the sort of maybe developers and the community around Apple, what we would like to see next year.
Sure. I'll tell you, on iOS side, I'd like to see more professional iPad apps. We've got some, but now that Apple has the hardware game figured out, now that they've got a better file system and we can connect a drive to the iPad, I feel like that the penny that needs a drop is some really, mind-blowing iPad applications. And I'd really like this to be the year that we get that.
The hardware is there, right? Like it can do anything, it seems like. And you can see third-party apps really pushing in some interesting ways. But why hasn't Apple put Logic or Final Cut or, some version of them on the iPad? Things like GarageBand can only get you so far. Things like iMovie can only get you so far. And I think it would be spectacular to see what they could do in that arena with that hardware.
I think one of the big problems has been the pricing model. People pay real money for Mac apps, and they generally don't for iPad and iPhone apps. But as the subscription pricing models got better, companies like Adobe are now heading to the iPad. I feel like that we're going to see more of it this year, and I really feel like the platform has got to a point where it's entitled to have some pro level apps, and just as pro level as the apps on the Mac, frankly. And we need more of that heading into 2020. That's one of my big hopes.
Yeah. Xcode, right? The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to see, actually kind of hand in hand with that, is more and better Catalyst apps on the Mac. I would like Apple to lead the charge there, again, with messages or something else, showing what this technology can do, showing what SwiftUI can do, just kind of pushing those boundaries in a way that makes sense. I think moving to something like Catalyst or SwiftUI just to do it, like if you're a developer, like that's fine, I guess, but there should always be a compelling reason. And I think a lot of the apps we spoke about with John a few weeks ago wouldn't exist otherwise. And so that makes me excited about the future of this. So I hope developers keep a focus on that.
Yeah, agreed. And hopefully, even some toes getting dipped into SwiftUI would be nice too. I'd like to see a greater embrace of shortcuts. I mean, it's been way better in 2019 than it was in 2018. But now that Apple's created the system where you can essentially create your own shortcut tools with an app developer can, I want to see more of that. And I feel like we will. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff in the works. I hear from developers all the time that are coming up with interesting and unique ways to do that. And I love automation on iOS, and I think that's the path.
One thing you mentioned, but I'm gonna jump in here and steal it. Is
Sure.
More HomeKit stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like more hardware from more manufacturers. I went through this whole thing with like HomeKit Secure Video, trying a camera, and it was really bad. It's like that stuff should be good, and Apple needs to work with their partners and make it good, because HomeKit is really compelling. I mean, in the last couple of weeks when we're recording this, there's been a lot of news about Ring and these other camera companies and security issues, and I want HomeKit to handle all that for me, but it just can't yet. And I hope that's a big focus for 2020 because I'd love to move. I mean, I would pick up a bunch of my smart home stuff and move it into HomeKit if I could, but I just can't yet.
Yeah, I've been trying to because I really buy into Apple's position on privacy. And I think in particular with HomeKit, this is a thing where I really don't want some company putting a spreadsheet together with the number of times I open and close my front door. I just don't want that stuff. And the camera stuff is even more creepy, and Apple, I think, has a compelling story to tell that they're not in it for that. And they want you to keep your stuff private. I have had this back channel communication going on with Zach Hall over at 9 to 5 Mac over the whole year, honestly, because I said I want to upgrade my cameras this year to HomeKit, but Zach is always testing them. So I'm always like, Zach, tell me when I can buy one, and honestly, as we got to the end of the year, I had tried a couple things and nothing really worked, and I want to share it with the audience how, this is the way you're going to get HomeKit to work. It's still not there yet. I saw a sale on Nest Cam. I'm sorry, not Nest, Canary Cams. I have a Canary system already. So I bought a couple more Canaries, and I'm just kind of kicking the can down the road 6 months just to see where we end up with this stuff. But it just reminded me that as good as HomeKit is, it doesn't have the hardware support that it needs, and we need to see it get to that next level, and hopefully that happens next year.
I think my last one it's sort of for the community, so it's a little bit different from what we've talked about. But I think the Apple community is bigger than ever, and I'm not talking about MPU specifically. It's just like in general, people using Apple products. That number is bigger than ever, and I think as that continues to happen, those of us who have been here a long time should be welcoming to new users, people exploring this world for the first time. It should be a community where they feel welcomed and safe to ask questions, and because that was true for us, when we were coming up. I know it was for me. Where I got my start in all of this on like the Apple discussion boards when I was in high school and college. And I think for the most part, the Apple community does a pretty good job of this, actually. Like part of this is like a pat on the back that I think we're actually, for the most part, a pretty welcoming group and pretty supportive of new users. But I think just we all just want to make this stuff work better for ourselves and our loved ones. And I think where we have opportunity to do that, we should take it. And that's harder than just kind of being snippy on Twitter, but it's ultimately more rewarding for everybody. So that's something I want to be better at. I think our community is really good at it. I think the MPU family is really good at it, but I want to see that continue to get better in the year to come.
I mean, there's two communities I participate in. Really, it's kind of the Apple ecosystem community, and also I participate in some of the Star Wars stuff. And in both of those communities, because of the internet, it's become real easy to be that guy who's like super negative about something. Like,
right.
Oh, you're on the iOS. You're not a real Apple person because the only people who use the Mac are real. Or, and the same thing, the Star Wars is the same way. And it feels like in our modern kind of society and the anonymized communication and mass distribution of ideas has this polarizing effect where no matter what you're interested in, everybody has to become tribal and choose sides. And I was really happy you put this in because I agree with you. I feel like Apple has avoided that. I remember the old days when it was Mac versus Windows. And it was horrible, honestly. I mean, whatever. I've always told people, use whatever works for you. This works for me and I'm going to share my story, but I don't care. I mean, and then it kind of started with iPhone versus Android, but that never really took off. But I'm just, I would like to, once again, I think celebrate our community hasn't really gone down that road. When we made the forums for Mac power users, I looked at it very carefully at the beginning as to, am I going to keep paying for this? Because I'm not going to create like a hate forum. If that's what it is, we're just not going to do it. But it never did. I mean, people are very supportive, and I agree with you. I think we need to keep mindful of that as we go forward. I was really glad you put this in the outline.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the forums, we put out a call for 2020 wishes from our listeners, and I actually read this after I put my stuff in because I wanted to make sure like my thoughts were my thoughts.
Sure.
But it was amazing how many things I read in this forum post like that we've already covered.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us are on the same page with this.
Yeah, we had actually made the outline for the show before I put the post up, but But there was also some really good ideas in here
Yeah.
too that we missed.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of talk around the Apple Watch, which I've sort of come back to since September in a bigger way than I expected with the always on
Really?
display.
You didn't tell me that.
It's not on my wrist every day, but it's on my wrist most days.
All right.
And one thing that several people pointed out was like even more customization of the Apple Watch faces. You know, I'm using the California watch face, and it's great because you can really make it do a lot of different things and make them look totally different. But it's like it's just a taste of what it could be if Apple really let, I'm going to say it, third-party developers build watch faces, or at least make the first-party ones more flexible. And I feel like it's more important now than ever because of the always-on display that other people can see it, you know?
Right now, Tim Cook is like 5 a.m. and Tim Cook is listening to this on his morning workout. You
Of
know,
course. Hey, Tim.
In my head canon, he listens to every episode. So Tim, listen to me, Tim. All right, this is what you do. Make the Apple Watch faces. You sell them for 99 cents each. Nerds like me will buy a bunch of them. Then you can just give away the 99-cent tier of iCloud. So when you get your quarterly earnings, you're going to have the same numbers. It's all good, baby. But just give the storage away, sell the watch faces. It's going to work. There we go.
I love it.
You can have it for free, Tim.
So yeah, the Apple Watch customization I think is a huge one, and it's evergreen. Like until it happens, we're just gonna keep talking about it.
So which watch face are you using now that you're wearing your watch every day?
So I'm using California,
Me too.
and I've got it full of complications, and it's
Oh, really?
Mhm.
There aren't that many on the California face.
Yeah.
Oh, you've probably got the smaller version where you can put them around the edges.
Yes, I'm using the round version. I'll put a link of it in the show notes, but I've got the date, calendar event, and then activity rings, carrot weather, and Todoist, so I can see stuff.
We're going to share ours. I'm going to do the same thing. And now, have you got the dark background or the light background? What's the background?
Yeah, dark background, and all the text is just white. I don't like a lot of color on my watch faces.
Yeah, me too. Ours are going to look very similar, except, and then you've got the Roman numerals on top and the Arabic numerals on the bottom, right? Like a gentleman.
No, I'm using the Arabic
What?
numbers all the way around.
Oh, geez, Stephen.
Sorry.
Stephen. Yeah, I do have the full size screen. It's the 50 plus watch face because I tried the smaller ones. I couldn't read any of them without my glasses on. So I'm like, what's the point if I can't read them? But I just had the date.
Yeah.
And then I'm one swipe away from the, the one with all the data. If I need all the data, I've got that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the utility or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's fun. Let's share that. If in the forum you've got a special watch face that you think is really cool, you should share it. If they were to make a watch face, do you know what you would want?
See, that's where I always fall down in this exercise because I don't know. Primarily, I would like to be able to mix and match a little bit more. Like there's part of this California style that I don't really care for. Like one thing I used to really like in the utility watch face was to be able to change the color of the second hand. And
Yeah.
you can't do that. It's always red. Like that's small and silly, but like I really enjoyed that I could change it to match, my mood or what I was wearing or something. And now it's just always red. And I find that to be a little sad.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see some more customization too. And I'd like to just see what smart people come up with. I'm sure there'd be a few in there that I'd like.
Mm-hmm.
The another common theme from the listeners was iCloud Drive to take on Dropbox.
Yeah,
we've talked about that enough, but I mean, this is the year. They kind of announced it already, so cash the check now that you've written it. Smaller cut into developers' income, 30% is too high. Why not? I mean, it's easy to give away Apple's money, but that is a lot of money.
it is a lot of money. And if in the world of renewing subscriptions, if a customer stays with you for a year, then it drops to 15%. So that has helped, but not all apps have that, and retention can be difficult to maintain. And yeah, 30% is at this point it is too high. And I obviously don't know the economics of it, but whatever they are, Apple can absorb it. And I think it would go a long way towards developers feeling good about working on Apple's platforms.
It's hard for me to root against developers on any question. The
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that when I went from selling books from iBooks Author to selling them myself, that 30% raise I got was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
The lower power data mode for Mac OS. It's just basically, can we have something that allows us to, like when we tether, automatically, slow down the data that we take.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about trip mode a lot, but that should just be built in. And
yeah,
I really actually like this. I think the more interesting part of this is low power mode, because on iOS, like on your iPhone, it's amazing how big of a difference it can make if you just flip it into low power mode. And that would be nice on the Mac if you're traveling or something, have a long day, and Apple's got to figure out how to make all that work. But I think it would be nice to have that option. And right now you can kind of do it with trip mode, even of like, well, if photos can't talk to the internet, it's not going to spin up the CPU, so I'm saving power that way. But like, this should be cleaner and more accessible to all users, not just those who have heard about, a random third-party utility.
Yeah. And really part and parcel to this would be a cellular enabled Mac. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe ARM will make that more possible. I guess we'll find out at some point in the future.
Yeah. An Apple made networking product like Eero. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. It's like Apple doesn't need to mine my data. Just like the HomeKit discussion, I would much prefer to do stuff like that with a company that doesn't sell ads.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know I don't know why they gave up on it, but, but that kind of goes back to that period of time when I felt like they were kind of focused on cars and other things too much. Maybe part of them turning their attention back to their core products will result in something like this. I think it's wishful thinking, probably, but
probably maybe. They've announced HomeKit support for routers, but I don't think anyone actually knows what that means. Like, it's just who knows? And so maybe that will solve some of this. But I think that I feel like Apple got out of it just at the wrong time. Like, as they got out of it, Eero and Linksys, these others did these like multi-point. We've talked about. Eero's a sponsor. Like, disclose that.
Yeah.
I didn't pay for the Eeros in my house, but they're really good. And if you have a house like mine that's sort of spread out in a weird way, it's great. And the airport couldn't ever really do that, but I loved managing the airports because it was really easy. It's like, Apple, you just get back in the water. There's room for you to swim in this pool too.
What if Apple TVs and HomePods had that technology built in?
Yeah, you're already, we're already going to have that stuff in the house, and I think it would be really interesting to see them get back into it, sort of in the modern era.
Yeah, hopefully.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. You can make your next move with Squarespace because it lets you combine things like a unique domain name, award-winning templates, and much more. If you just think about the last website you visited for maybe a small business. They've got a portfolio, pictures of products. They have an online store, perhaps. They have maps. They have a contact form. Websites need all of this stuff, and Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that lets you do all of those things under one roof. And the best part is there's no like software patches to install. You don't have to become some sort of web admin because Squarespace has all of that sort of stuff covered. They have award-winning 24/7 customer support if you have any questions at all. And they let you quickly and easily grab a unique domain name and an award-winning template that are all beautifully designed for you to show off your great ideas so you can get the ball rolling. Anytime someone comes to me with help for a website, we go to Squarespace. I'm getting ready to start a new website for my elementary school, kids' elementary school, like their parent organization, because the website they have now, it's built in something else that's really hard to maintain. It looks bad, and Squarespace is going to solve all their problems. Squarespace plans start at just $12 a month, but you can start a trial with no credit card required by going to squarespace.com/MPU. And when you decide to sign up, use the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain name and to show you support for the show. Once again, that's squarespace.com/MPU and the code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase. I'd like to thank Squarespace for the support of the show and all of Relay FM. Squarespace, make your next move, make your next website.
All right, I thought it'd be fun as we're heading into 2020 to just talk about some of the tech we want to get better at heading into the next year. For me, I always at the new year do kind of like give some thought to that. Where am I falling down with my technology? Where could I get better? And I have actually quite a few on my list here. The first one is something, and I've been talking about this on the Automators podcast as well, is I feel like I'm aware of a lot of the cloud-based automation tools, like Zapier, but I'm not using them to their full advantage. I'm very good at automation stuff on like Shortcuts and Keyboard Maestro. The native platform automation, I've got wired down pretty good, but I want to get better at cloud automation next year.
Those tools are really powerful, right? Because they glue all of these things together that make it difficult, or difficult to do in the sort of the native apps you talked about. I've got Zapier set up for quite a few things. And, one of my favorites is if you tweet with a certain hashtag, it goes into a spreadsheet. Like I used to spend tons of time a week on show prep looking for that hashtag and going through tweets. And it's just awesome to open a Google Sheet and see it all collected there by the little Zapier robot. And it's really changed the way I work in those sort of areas for the better.
Yeah, another one for me is home automation. We've got some listeners that are doing amazing things with home automation.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some real HomeKit wizards out there.
Yeah, but HomeKit, there are limits. It's not, there's better tools for home automation if you really want to go deep, right? I mean, I remember the old X10 days and it was crazy. But, it's like I was listening to an episode of Connected where Federico was talking about how he had an alarm connected.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Just to he had a house alarm connected to a switch, because you can have a HomeKit switch that cuts the power off or turns it on. I'm like, that's kind of obvious, but also kind of brilliant, and I never even occurred to me. And like I've been going deeper with the HomeKit automation stuff, like even just with like our Christmas tree lights, or like in my studio, I have some of those strip lights. But then like I'll be in bed at night and I'll think of something I need to do and go into the studio and be stumbling over. So I just put an IR sensor in the studio, and if it's between certain hours and I come in, it puts the strip lights on at 50%. And then it turns them off after 5 minutes. It's such an obvious, easy automation. Listeners are saying that's not, you're not helping me, Dave. That I already knew how to do that. But just like having stuff like that in my life does make it easier. And I want to get better at that this year.
One for me in sort of the automation realm is applying automation to my production chain for podcast. So I have a little bit of this now, with Mojave and like the Finder services thing. You can make an automator action and turn it into like a right click thing really easily. And I have some of that, and I'm not being vague just to be vague. Like it's actually kind of hard to talk about this, but I've got, I need to bring files in. I need to make sure they're in the right folder. I need to do some stuff I use Adobe Audition to normalize and do some volume stuff with them. And then I edit in Logic, and just looking for ways where I can automate that would be useful, because it's stuff that I do like all the time. And that's always like the best place to think about where you may want to add automation, or things that you're repeating tasks. And this is a huge one for me. Even some file management stuff on the back end. So I keep podcast, like the edited Logic projects around for a couple of weeks, and then I discard them. I don't keep the Logic files long term. I used to do it, but I do way too many shows now. And over the course of 5 years, like I would definitely be out of drive space. And even that of like just knowing when that folder, when I could get rid of that. So I've played with Hazel a little bit in that regard, but I haven't found anything I quite like yet. So I really want to focus my sort of automation skills on my production in 2020. So I can speed things up that I do, day in and day out.
Yeah, you got to preserve that 4 terabyte SSD in there.
That's right.
I want to do a Keyboard Maestro intervention with you at some point. Like, just tell me your problems and let me try and write a Keyboard Maestro script for you. Because I feel like the Keyboard Maestro would solve almost all of those problems. But it's a little fiddly. Like, you have to remember to put pauses in the scripts and stuff. It's once you spend some time with the app. In fact, I just got an email from a listener saying that that's his Christmas break task. He's going to like really dig in on the Keyboard Maestro field guide and try and get good at it. But you got to like kind of learn the little weird things about it. But I feel like if you put that into place, I think you could automate a lot of that stuff.
I think so too.
My last one is I want to get better at video production, because I have this YouTube channel. I don't publish to it enough, and I make too much out of it every time I produce it. I feel like I have good enough equipment to make decent videos. I just need to get better at doing it, but just seems like that always falls to the back burner. So I don't know. I have every year I always have a lot I want to do next year.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. I didn't have in the doc, but I'm with you on the YouTube stuff. Like I've had a pretty good pace at the end of the year, and I have done things in like my gear setup to make that easier to reduce the friction of making videos. Part of that is the Mac Pro. But a lot of that is time. Like as I do more videos, I get much faster at it. And I want to kind of keep that pace up next year when I can. It's still basically a hobby, but I want to be more present on my YouTube channel. You know, it just crossed 20,000 subscribers, which is not a lot in YouTube land, but it's a lot for me. And it was a nice achievement. And I saw a lot of that growth as I was publishing videos more rapidly. And with YouTube, you got to feed the machine. And I want to get better at all that in 2020.
And what I would say to all the MPU listeners, and I know there's a lot more than 20,000 of you out there, if you have a moment this week, go sign up and subscribe to Steven's channel. If you feel really generous, sign up for mine. But Steven's is amazing, and he does really great work. And if you like MPU, you're going to like the stuff he's putting out on that channel.
Thanks, man. I will put both in the show notes. People can do them both.
Yeah, you can see, an example of somebody doing it right and somebody doing it wrong.
I don't know about that. It is funny, though. We're on a tangent now. I apologize. But like I've been writing 512 Pixels for coming up on entering the 12th year. And my old writing is not good, but at least it's buried in WordPress somewhere. But on YouTube, like one of my most popular videos is my first one. And it's garbage. But for whatever reason, it does really well in search. So, I'm not ever going to pull them down, but I can really see over the course of the 3 or 4 years of my channel how the quality's really gone up, and I'm really proud of that. But the downside of that is you watch something old, it's like, ooh, that's not very good.
So what about Mac Power users? One of the things Steve and I do is we have a monthly call where we talk about not only the upcoming shows, but just the show in general and things we want to do. And a lot of the stuff that we talked about in preparing for this year came true. So we're very happy to have live shows and the thing with Apple. We're looking to do the same thing for next year, more of the same. We're going to continue largely to have content and guest shows. We're hoping to have a live show in 2020. I'm sorry if you're in Chicago. It's not going to be in Chicago. We've done a lot there. So
we have
a couple locations in mind. We don't want to say anything yet, but we're hoping. And the other thing both Steve and I want to do this year is we were looking back. Some of our favorite shows were not were the guest shows that didn't include somebody that normally writes tech, and those are great people to have on because they have a lot of opinions and they try out a lot of things. So we're still going to have folks like that on. But I also want to, make sure we get out there to the sheep farmers of our audience and other folks who have interesting things to say. So heading into 2020, we're doing a call for guests. Now, if you are doing something interesting with your Apple tech, let us know and send us a note, kind of give us an idea what you're doing. I don't know if these are going to be full shows or maybe we'll have some shows with multiple guests, but we want to hear from different voices this year and let us know what you've got to say. I'm not promising you that if you write me an email, no matter how many words it is, you're going to get on. We've got to still kind of do some balancing and things, but please do send it through. We are going to look at these real seriously. If you've already sent me one in the last year, I've got a nice list I've been building, but go ahead and forward it again. I probably got you already, but just in case. But we're looking to get some interesting guests next year, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we've got a couple scheduled now that I'm really excited about, and I agree with that. And I think having the variety is always really interesting. I think something else that I think about for the show of next year is to go back to the forums for a little bit, is to continue to grow that. We talk about that a bunch, and it's a great community. So if you've listened to the show for a long time and you haven't checked that out, I think it's totally worth your time to dip your toe in the water there. And even if you're, I check it, several times a week, but even if you just have a question that comes up, instead of asking Twitter or Facebook, come to the Mac Power Users Forum first, and I bet people can get you taken care of.
It's a place that people answer questions with love, there aren't many places like that on the internet right now. So I think it's great. Another thing we did this year we didn't even mention was the newsletter, and that's doing really well too. So I don't know, I think we had a good year. Just in closing, as we were making this transition last year. Once I knew Katie, had some things she needed to do, and I had to say, well, do I still want to make Mac Power Users? I was still excited about it then. And Stephen, you were, as I've said before on the show, you were the first choice. And I'm just so happy that you came on the show. And I still love making this show every week. And that means that you, dear listener, are stuck with us for the foreseeable future. And
that's right.
And I just want to thank all the listeners that have been so supportive. I know when there's a host change, nobody likes change, but I've talked to a lot of you. I've corresponded with even more of you. And it's just, you guys have been so generous to me and Stephen as we've changed the show up a little bit. It always comes with a host change, but you've stuck in there with us, and I just really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great holiday. And as you go into the new year, not only are you looking forward to having fun next year, but coming along for the ride with the Mac Power Users. All right, well, thanks to our sponsors, 1Password, FreshBooks, Direct Mail, and Squarespace. We are the Mac Power Users, and we'll see you next week.